Taphony. Hello and welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about the K9 episode Taphony and the Time Loop, written by Anthony Morris and Graham Farmer, and is directed by Mark DeFrance. This episode gives us a little bit of more detail about the past of Professor Griffiths, one of the main characters of the series, and I actually really enjoyed this one. This is another actually a standout for the series, a really interesting episode. And I find that when it comes to the K9 series, the best ones are always the ones that has much more focus, much more well-structured, doesn't have a lot of distraction, doesn't have a lot of plot lines and a lot of really plot and stuff, but it's got something simple to do, something simple to say. I feel like that's when K9's at its best. I'm starting to get into the routine of episodes that I like. And with this episode, with that title, which I absolutely love, Taphony and the Time Loop. That is so catchy and so corny, but it really does work for the series. But yeah, it's good for a K9 episode. Does that really count for anything? Because K9 is known for not being very well regarded. If you've seen my marathon, you know that there are a lot of episodes I don't like. However, there are a few that stands out. House of the Fall of Griffiths, Fear Itself, that one where it's basically Mean Girls. Yeah, there actually have been a handful of pretty good and decent stories. And here I feel like is another good one. It's really all odd because at the start of the story we get introduced to this girl, and she's clearly in some sort of a limbo reality. Originally I thought this is the time loop within the storyline, because she seems to have no memory of who she is, and suddenly she gets greeted by Professor Griffith, who tells her to basically what's happening, and also as well he keeps appearing in the virtual simulation with there's multiple of him and they're all out of sync. So my first thoughts was that this is the time loop. However, no, this is actually the virtual detention center, the prison that appeared in the second episode of the series, the one that Starkey was in that episode. Can't remember for the life of me what that episode is called, but essentially Professor Griffiths states that he's in this prison there. She's in this prison. The department have put a block on her mental capacity, so she has no memory of who she is when she's in this virtual world. But don't worry, he's going to help her. He's going to protect her. And what he's going to do is break her out of the prison and get her out of the detention centre, get to a safe spot, to which Professor Griffiths will then open a portal just outside her room and will try and get her to a safe location from her. She wakes up, she's in the detention centre, the door opens, she goes out, she sees two of those robot coppers that are like, right, you're going back in. However, something odd happens. They seem to be lower in the frame rate around them, and what's really cool is that this scene actually takes place from a camera's perspective, so that the frame rate actually feels extremely natural before they kind of just disappear, implying that this girl, which we learn is Taphony, has this enormous power, and she's also seemingly has the ability to speed up her local time, as she can move extremely quick and extremely make other things move extremely slow from her point of view. And Professor Griffiths then opens the portal and seemingly can't get her to the location that he plans for her. She seems to not want to go to a dimension where the laws of time actually work vastly different from our own. And K9 even warns Griffiths of an entity which exists in that. So Professor Griffiths can't get her to the location he was meant for her, so he actually teleports her using the time portal to take her into her house, into Professor Griffiths' house, sorry. Now, you could argue, what was the point of that breakout scene? He could have just teleported her when she was sitting down. I actually have a pretty decent argument. Professor Griffiths didn't actually use his teleporting system. He only used it to communicate it so he can transport her to his house. He actually hacked into the department's teleportation system, where their teleportation system is located more outside of the respective cells. So that's the explanation I'm going with. There's nothing actually stated in the story itself. We also learn that Professor Griffiths was born in 2012, which means that that in terms of Doctor Who's perspective, he's actually born a year after the series that we're on with Series 6, so that's kind of interesting. And Darius gets introduced to Taphony when he's got this birthday cake out, only for Taphony to be shocked and stunned. It's like, I don't know who the hell of you are. And she touches the cake and it just evaporates into thin air, seemingly absorbing it. Seemingly anything she touches, she absorbs all the time matter out. Sometimes that means turning it into dust, or as we see later on, just completely aging it almost to death. And what I think what the key of this story is, Taphony. She's this very odd character who's not really sure of herself. She's got a kind of childlike mindset where she just wants to play, she just wants to have fun, and she's just meet these new people who are the first people that she's met that have really been nice and kind to her and has freed her and would let her play with them, and she quickly gains this bond with them. And when all hell breaks loose, essentially she is the one that freaks out. She's essentially the villain in this story. She is played by Maya Mitchell, who is now best known for her Disney TV movie roles. I can't remember which one she's in. I'm not too well versed in the Disney TV movies, but safe to say that she has gained some good work after this. So, and in this role, I think it's well deserved, and she captures these strange mannerisms. And later on, we learn with her connection with Georgie, and she kind of copies her. You see her like looking at Georgie, and Georgie does stuff like playing with her hair, puts her hair back, and Taphony does the same thing, and she kind of starts absorbing Georgie's movements and manner of speech, and it just nicely fits together. And the role, Maya Mitchell does a great job with this role, and I feel like she really holds this episode together. And Professor Griffiths basically explains what has happened. Essentially, the department in the past were trying to create a time-traveling entity, someone who can travel in time, or someone who can take the life force of someone, so they can time travel. They specifically say created. So she's not. I think the story was trying to imply that she she was captured and she was experimented on. However, the way the story's dialogue is structured, it sounds like they actually created this person who is a time blank, a entity, a creature that exists outside of time itself. And so her relationship with time is very unique and it's very different compared to all the normal characters in the series. And what Griffiths had done is that he was, of course, one of the main experts in the field of time. So he was actually brought on board. However, his conscience was getting the better of him, and we also learned that the cake earlier on was for his birthday. His birthday is actually the day after. Darius got the days mixed up, but Griffith, with his pending birthday coming up, kind of is reminiscent of all the horrible things he had done whilst working for the department, and so he decided to take matters into his own hands and break Taphony out. And he was actually one of the people who experimented on her to try to create time travel. So it's essentially him trying to make things better, which makes Griffiths have a much personal connection with this story, and I feel like he should have been the heart of our protagonist. If Taphony is this relatable villain of the story, then Griffith should be our heart and soul, our protagonist. But the story doesn't actually do that. K9 basically explains it, that Taphony's appearance here is actually extremely dangerous to everybody around her. She's in a timeline in which the time she's in doesn't actually sync with her own. So what she has to do is absorb somebody else's timeline, and that could lead to death of one of the crew members. K9 insists immediately that they get Taphony to explain what she needs to do and get back to her own dimension, which she isn't actually aware of. To her, it's completely new, and she actually gains this bond with Georgie, specifically, which K9 points out that Taphony is actually gaining a bit of colour in her skin. When she left the department, she was really pale. However, now Georgie is the one who's getting pale, so it's clearly to them that Georgie is the one that's being absorbed. Her timeline is being used to essentially be absorbed. And Professor Griffiths tries to convince Taphony in a nice gesture. It's like, okay, sorry Taphony, but you have to leave, we have to take you back. But Taphony, being this young character who just wants to play and have fun and doesn't understand the harm she's causing, feels threatened by this, and she actually absorbs a lot of Professor Griffiths' timeline, turning him into an elderly man. And essentially at this point, Griffith then becomes kind of sidelined in the story, which I felt was a massive disappointment, because it felt like this story was him coming into his own. He is the protagonist of the story. However, after he gets absorbed in a pretty decent aging effect, when I say effect, makeup, which reminds me a lot of the Doctor Who story, The Leisurer's Hive. Professor Griffith, he's kind of then put like the backbone. He's out of action essentially, only really stating it's like, right, we gotta find Taphony quick before Georgie dies, and due to, according to K9, a temporal phenomenon, the characters, they don't quite. I've completely lost my train of thought. Sorry. Professor Griffiths is the one that's basically telling them, it's like, right, we've got to find her quick. So Darius, Georgie, and Stark are the ones to try and find Taphony. At one point they have some fun, they play around. K9 explains also as well, this is what I was trying to mention, that due to a temporal phenomenon, if Professor Griffiths' state is left like this on his birthday, he would be stuck in this old age form for the rest of his life. He would not be able to transform back. So it becomes a kind of race of time. And our team actually find Taphony. They tell her, right, you've got to come back, you've got to help the professor. And she is just like, he was going to take me away. I had to punish him. I had to make him feel what I did, being a time freak. But I will fix him. I'll make him better. Don't worry. But for now, let's play. Let's have some fun. There's plenty of time. I can fix him later now. But for now, let's have some fun. And the characters then do have some fun. And the scene is then playing frisbee, and she's basically showing off her powers. They throw the frisbee, and she can slow down the frisbee, whereas her characters can be like, whoa. She can also speed it up. She can also move incredibly fast, catching the frisbee in front of Starkey before any of the characters can even see what she's doing. And the characters are having fun. And there's this great moment where Taphony speeds up the three characters, so they like frisbee in and they're like going really pedantic really quickly. And Taphony is just in complete control as she just walks around them elegantly in normal time, as our characters are kind of trapped in the quickness of space, or the quickness of the time event. And so she and essentially then K9 breathes in. It's like, what are you doing? Oh, don't worry, K9, we're just having a little fun. Taphony is just a little kid, she's innocent, she just wants to play. And as well, Georgie really connects with Taphony, understanding that she doesn't actually understand the harm she's doing. She's only a kid, and she really hasn't had time to process the harm that she's doing. And she's just an innocent child, and Georgie is basically the voice of reason in that she is essentially still a child, and all the harm that she's doing, she doesn't mean to do. At the very least, she has no real awareness of how bad things can be. However, K9 puts a stop to all that and points out that Georgie is feeling incredibly weak, stating that the professor only has around about 2 hours at most, but that's more time than Georgie, who collapses and almost is basically bedridden for the rest of the episode. And then Georgie's mother comes in with trying to find Taphony and some details about her and Griffiths and stuff. What's really interesting is that earlier on in the episode we see Georgie's mother and Thorn, and they're talking about Taphony, and Georgie's mother seems like she has no idea what's going on, like she doesn't know who the prisoner is, how she's broken out, and Thorn isn't actually letting up. However, when Georgie's mother actually goes to Griffiths' house, she seems to already know who Taphony is and knows some way, shape or form her abilities. As Taphony talks to Georgie, she originally feels threatened by Georgie's mother. However, when she points out that she is her mother, she kind of starts gaining this connection. He tells her, I'm your daughter, she's my friend, I like her. And actually lets her into Griffiths' house. So it's a bit odd, it's a bit strange. However, I actually like this because it does kind of imply that she is now helping our team. She actually helped Professor Griffiths hack into the department's mainframe and break this prisoner out. Maybe she was in on it. Maybe, just maybe, she actually helped Taphony escape because her conscience can no longer take this, which I think is really cool that they hint at it, but it's not actually stated. There's not a scene in which they basically turn around and say to each other, oh yes, I helped you, but it's that implication at the door outside. Mark DeFrance's directing here is actually really well executed. There's a lot of great strange moments with the Taphony character, playing around with the time. You can also tell that Mark DeFrance in terms of a visual, really enjoys directing Maya Mitchell, because there's a lot of great shots with her in the story, and she just has this massive presence, and DeFrance gives that presence off in his camera directing choices. It's really it's a really well executed duo of actor and director here. And though I don't think Mark DeFrance is a particularly strong director in most of his episodes, here I feel like this is an easier standout of his work. And so we also get a scene. The story essentially concludes with all of our characters seeing Georgie really weak, and she's dying. And it's also as well, time is almost up. We've got about half an hour before Professor Griffith's birthday, which will mean that he will be stuck in his old age permanently. And suddenly the time freezes. I also like how the background, any sort of sound effects or score in the background completely stops when Taphony stops time. And she witnesses a small event in which our characters, they see Georgie and they each offer themselves. It's like, right, there's no reason why she has to take Georgie, so I'm going to offer myself. Georgie's mother's like, no, I'm going to offer myself. I am her mother. It's my duty of care. Darius offers himself, and Professor Griffiths is like, I clearly don't have enough time here. I'm the oldest in the crew, so clearly it should be me. And they basically all agree. It's like, right, there's only one way to settle this. We all offer ourselves, and we just let her pick, because we're all willing to die for our friend, for Georgie. And Taphony sees the sacrifices our characters are making, or are planning on making. And K9, who actually has a unique ability of time, as he states, just like Taphony, his relationship with time isn't completely set with everyone else's. Maybe due to his time travels with the Doctor, or the fact that this K9 in particular lived his life on Gallifrey, is the most likely explanation. But the two characters talk as Taphony is just like, they'd sacrifice themselves, and K9's like, yes, that's what friends do. They put themselves in harms for the benefits of their friends. They would sacrifice themselves for their friends. And she kind of realizes that, right, friends do not let other friends put themselves in pain. She will sacrifice herself. She will go into a dimension which she has no idea if there's even entities like her in this dimension. K9 also points out they might not even be able to play Frisbee, which is like her favourite game. But she cannot stand longer to see Georgie, her friend, suffer from this, and Professor Griffiths as well. So with 10 minutes on the clock, she agrees to go back, go into the time portal and get transported to her own time dimension. She also states as well that when she does go through the portal, none of the characters are going to be able to remember her, but don't worry, she will remember them. As when she steps into the portal, suddenly we see all the footage of the episode reverse. We then cut back to the scene in which Professor Griffith is unable to transport her to her own dimension, so he decides to try and take her into the house. However, this time she does actually be able to go into her own dimension, into her own unique timeline. And Darius walks in with the cake, and they have a humorous moment where it's like, oh, Darius, it's a nice gesture, but it's not my birthday. And we also get a hint that K9 might be the only character who actually remembers these events, as Professor Griffiths basically is like, you warned me not to do it, but I showed you. And K9 is just quietly like, yes, you did. And then, like, you know, he's like thinking to himself, kind of implying that he remembers it, especially like as it's established within the episode, K9 has a unique relationship with time, like Taphony. And that is Taphony and the Time Loop. Overall, this is a really good episode. It's fun, it's engaging, you have a nice heart with this really fun and engaging villain. However, the short straw is the main character, with Professor Griffiths being the heart of the story, only for him to be out of action quite early on. Then Georgie becomes the heart of the story, with her coming out of it pretty quickly. But in terms of an ensemble cast, the story does actually hold up well with our character's decision at the end. A great ending as well to this story, really lifting it up among other K9 stories which usually fall flat on the ending. And yeah, there's not really much to say. It's just a really good episode. It's a lot of fun, pretty engaging, and Taphony is the character I think worth remembering. I don't know if she returns or not, but I hope she does. Or if not, I might actually write like a fan fiction where she returns in Doctor Who or something. I don't know. I just feel like she's a pretty cool character. So anyway, that's Taphony and the Time Loop. So join me next time where the Doctor will be fighting alongside pirates as a mermaid seems to be haunting the lake the boat is floating upon, as we find out there's a stowaway on board. So join me next time for The Curse of the Black Spot. And I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-da!